The countryman was deceived by his own family. But his dog discovered something on the abandoned island. Thomas Anderson woke up that Tuesday in March without imagining that his 40-year life by Mirror Lake was about to collapse. The 62-year-old fisherman lived in a simple little wooden house painted faded blue, where each morning the sound of gentle waves against the pier woke him along with the happy barks of Snowball, his faithful canine companion. It was Nancy from the store who brought the devastating news. The woman arrived breathless, still holding the paper she had snatched from the mailman's hands. His siblings, Richard, Michael, and Elizabeth, had sold the house where he lived, using a power of attorney that Thomas had never signed. The buyer, a businessman from New York named Garrett Thompson, would arrive in 3 hours to take possession of the property. Thomas had exactly that time to gather his belongings and leave. The world seemed to spin as Thomas held the document with trembling hands. The signature was there, too perfect to be real, but convincing enough to fool any clerk at the notary's office. His own siblings, the same ones he had helped during their difficult childhood on their father's farm, had been scheming behind his back for months. Snowball sniffed his owner's anguish and began to whimper softly, pressing his wet snout against the man's leg. The completely white-haired dog, already 12 years old, had the most expressive brown eyes Thomas had ever seen in any living being. It was as if the animal understood every word, every tear that stubbornly welled up in the fisherman's tired eyes. Rage filled Thomas's chest when he thought of Richard, the oldest brother, always with that fake smile and honeyed words. Michael, the middle one, who was always borrowing money and never paying it back. And Elizabeth, the only sister who thought she was superior because she had married a city merchant and lived in a 2-story house. During the 40 years Thomas had lived on that property, since marrying Sarah, he never imagined his siblings could plot against him like this. Sarah had left 15 years ago, on a cold June morning, leaving only a note saying she needed to go away. Since then, only Snowball kept the fisherman company during the long, silent nights. The blue and white wooden boat rocked gently tied to the small pier Thomas had built with his own hands. It was his only option at that moment, to take his few things, put Snowball in the boat, and go to the one place where no one would bother him, Ruin Island in the center of Mirror Lake. Thomas knew every inch of those waters. He had fished there since childhood, when his father took them on weekends. The island had always been surrounded by mysteries and haunted stories that the older residents told on stormy nights. They said it had been a luxury hotel in the 1940s, but something terrible had happened there, and the place had been abandoned ever since. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. The decision was made in a moment of desperation. Thomas filled 2 bags with clothes, took the can with his savings hidden under the bed, and carried a bag of dog food for Snowball. The dog followed every movement attentively, as if he knew something important was happening. The boat's engine purred softly when Thomas pulled the starter cord. Snowball sat at the bow, his white fur fluttering in the gentle afternoon breeze. The lake waters were calm, reflecting the blue sky dotted with white clouds that looked like cotton. As he rowed toward the island, Thomas tried to understand how he had reached this point. He had always been the youngest brother, the one who cared for his parents when they fell ill, the one who never complained when he had to give up his studies to work in the fields. Richard pursued a military career, Michael started a small construction supply business, and Elizabeth married well. Thomas chose the simple life, fishing and tending a small garden. The distance to the island was about 2 kilometers. During the journey, Thomas observed the ruined structure that dominated the highest point of the land. The stone walls still stood the test of time, covered in ivy and moss. A spiral staircase, carved from the rock itself, led from the shore to the main building. When the boat reached the small beach of coarse sand, Snowball jumped out first, sniffing the ground with unusual interest. The dog had never been to the island before, but seemed to know every scent, every trail among the trees. Thomas grabbed the bags and began climbing the stone staircase, his heart heavy with the injustice he had suffered. The main building had 3 floors, with window frames devoid of glass that let the wind circulate freely through the empty rooms. Thomas chose a room on the ground floor, near what must have once been the kitchen, and improvised a bed with the few clothes he had brought. Snowball explored every corner, sniffing intently at a specific wall covered in moss. The first night on the island was the longest of Thomas's life. The silence was broken only by the sound of the waves and the nighttime noises of the small animals that inhabited the place. Snowball slept pressed against his owner's legs, as if wanting to protect him from some invisible danger. The next morning, Thomas woke to Snowball barking insistently near the wall the dog had sniffed the night before. The animal was scratching at a specific stone, covered by a thick layer of green moss. Something there had caught the dog's attention in a way Thomas had never seen before. Curious, the fisherman approached and began removing the moss with his hands. Underneath the vegetation, he discovered that the stone was not natural to that place. It seemed to have been placed there on purpose, as if hiding something. With a sturdy branch he found on the ground, Thomas managed to move the stone, revealing a hole in the soil. Inside the hole was a rusty but still sturdy metal box. Thomas's hands trembled as he pulled it out and tried to open the lid, which was stuck with rust. Snowball sniffed the box excitedly, wagging his tail as if he knew it was important. When he finally managed to open the box, Thomas found old documents protected by thick plastic. There were also some yellowed photographs and a handwritten letter in careful script. The first document he picked up made his heart race. It was a deed of ownership for Ruin Island, dated 1978, in the name of Mrs. Margaret Elizabeth Anderson, his mother who had passed away 20 years earlier. The letter was addressed to him, "To my son Thomas, the only one who always cared for me with true love." The fisherman's hands shook as he read each word, written in his mother's familiar handwriting. She explained that she had bought the island years before her passing, using the money from the sale of some cattle. "Thomas, my dear son, I know your siblings have always had their hearts set on material things. That's why I decided to leave something special just for you, who always preferred the simple things in life. This island may seem cursed to others, but for you, it will be a blessing. Inside this box are all the documents that prove you are the sole owner of this place." The letter went on to reveal secrets Thomas had never imagined. His mother had divided the other assets among her 4 children, but had left the island especially for him. She was aware of the greedy intentions of Richard, Michael, and Elizabeth, and that's why she had chosen an asset they would consider worthless. "My son, your brothers don't know about this inheritance because I wanted it that way. They always looked down on this place, saying it was cursed and lacked prestige. But I know you understand the value of things that can't be bought with money. This island will be your refuge when you need it, and also your wealth when you discover its true secrets." Thomas sat on a nearby rock, with Snowball lying at his feet, and reread the letter 3 times. His mother had spoken about secrets of the island, but what could that mean? He looked around, observing the ruins with new eyes. Perhaps there were more things hidden in that place than he had imagined. The other documents in the box included blueprints of the old hotel, purchase and sale contracts, and even photographs of what the building looked like in the 1940s. The place had truly been a luxury hotel, frequented by politicians and wealthy businessmen of the time. Thomas was impressed to see how elegant the building was before it was abandoned. One of the photographs showed a man in a light suit next to a woman in a floral dress, posing in front of the hotel. On the back, someone had written, "Dr. James and Mrs. Margaret, inauguration of the Mirror Lake Hotel, March 1942. Thomas put the photo in his shirt pocket, feeling a strange connection to those people from the past. Snowball started barking again, this time pointing in a different direction on the island. The dog ran a few meters and stopped, looking back as if wanting Thomas to follow him. The fisherman put the documents back in the box and followed the animal along the trail covered with dry leaves. The dog led him to a smaller building, half hidden by vegetation. It was some kind of storage room or workshop, with exposed brick walls and a partially destroyed roof. Snowball sniffed intensely at a specific wall, repeating the behavior he had shown the previous morning. Thomas began to examine the wall that had caught the dog's attention. There was something different there, as if some bricks had been placed after the others. Carefully, he tried to move one of the loose bricks and managed to create a small opening. On the other side, there was an empty space like a secret hiding spot. Reaching his hand into the hole, Thomas felt the touch of another metallic object. It was a second box, smaller than the first, but equally protected against moisture. When he managed to pull it out, he saw that it was well preserved and had a small padlock that broke easily with a hammer he found among the debris. This second box contained more recent documents and something that made Thomas's heart stop: an original power of attorney in his name, signed by his mother, giving him the authority to manage all her assets. The date of the power of attorney was 6 months before Mrs. Margaret's departure in 1985. There were also copies of other documents that proved how Thomas's brothers had manipulated the situation after their mother's departure. They had hidden the existence of the island, altered wills, and created fake powers of attorney to manage the assets they considered valuable. The house where Thomas had lived for 40 years was actually also in his name since his mother's departure. The most shocking of all was finding copies of letters that the brothers had exchanged among themselves, planning how to divide their mother's assets without including Thomas. Richard had written to Michael, "Thomas is very simple. He'll never question anything. We can keep the good properties and leave him with that little house by the lake. He's happy fishing and doesn't bother anyone." Michael's response was even crueler. "I agree with you, Richard. Thomas has always been a bit of a fool anyway. And that cursed island Mom bought, let's not even mention it. Let him keep thinking there's nothing there." Snowball seemed to sense the anger growing in his owner's chest. The dog approached and licked Thomas's hand as if wanting to comfort him. The fisherman hugged the animal tightly, feeling that Snowball was his only true family at that moment. But the most impressive discovery was yet to come. At the bottom of the second box was a detailed map of the island, hand-drawn by his mother. The drawing showed the location of 3 points marked with an X, in addition to the 2 places where Thomas had already found the boxes. The third point was near the western shore of the island, in an area he had not yet explored. The map included instructions written by his mother herself. "Thomas, if you're reading this, it means you've found the first secrets. But there's something more important waiting for you. Go to the marked point near the western waters. There you'll discover why this island is truly special, and why your brothers should never know about it." Curiosity took over Thomas. He stored all the documents in his backpack, called Snowball, and followed the trail toward the west side of the island. The terrain there was rougher, with larger rocks and denser vegetation. Snowball led the way, as if he knew the path, sniffing the air with growing interest. When they reached near the western shore, Thomas found a scene completely different from the rest of the island. There was a small natural beach protected by large rocks that formed a kind of private bay. The water was crystal clear and had a turquoise-blue color, unlike the rest of the lake. Snowball ran to the water's edge and began barking excitedly. The dog entered the shallow water and headed for a rock formation a few meters from the shore. Thomas followed the animal, getting his feet wet in the surprisingly warm water. Behind the rock formation was a small natural cave, almost invisible to anyone looking from the shore. Thomas had to crouch to enter, but inside the space opened up into an underground chamber lit by light, coming through cracks in the rocky ceiling. In the center of the cave was a spring of crystal-clear water flowing directly from the rock. The water had a different taste, purer and more refreshing than anything Thomas had ever experienced. Snowball drank from the spring with pleasure, wagging his tail contentedly. It was then that Thomas noticed something engraved on the rock wall near the spring. There were numbers and letters, as if someone had marked a date and their initials. MEA, 1978, Water of Life. The initials matched his mother's name, Margaret Elizabeth Anderson. A third box was hidden in a high crevice of the cave, protected from moisture and the elements. Thomas had to stack some stones to reach it, with Snowball barking excitedly throughout the operation. This box contained documents that completely changed Thomas's understanding of the place he was in. There were technical reports analyzing the spring water, dated 1979, which proved exceptional medicinal properties. The water contained a rare combination of minerals that made it valuable for health treatments. The documents included correspondence between his mother and specialized laboratories, mineral water companies, and even doctors who had tested the healing properties of the spring. One of the reports stated, "The water from this spring has a unique mineral composition in the region, with significant commercial potential for the medicinal water market." Thomas sat on a smooth rock inside the cave, trying to process everything he had discovered. His mother had not only left him an island, but a property with immense commercial value. The mineral water spring was the true treasure his brothers would never imagine existed. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. This really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Snowball drank more water from the spring and lay down beside Thomas, as if he knew this was an important moment. The fisherman stroked the dog's soft fur while planning what to do with all that information. The last letter from his mother, kept at the bottom of this third box, revealed the reasons for so much secrecy. Thomas, I discovered this spring just a few months after buying the island. I had tests done discreetly, without telling anyone in the family. The water has properties that could help many people, but it could also make a lot of money if exploited commercially. Your brothers only think of easy money. If they knew the value of this water, they would destroy everything in the name of profit. You've always been different, always respected nature and people. That's why I trust you'll make the right use of this blessing God placed in our hands. The letter ended with a revelation that moved Thomas to tears. My son, before I leave this world, I want you to know I've always been proud of the honest, hard-working man you've become. Your brothers have diplomas and businesses, but you have something they'll never have, a pure heart. This island and its secrets are my gift to you. Thomas stored all the documents and left the cave with Snowball, feeling like a completely different man. He was no longer the fisherman deceived and abandoned by his family. He was the legitimate owner of an island with incalculable value, armed with documentary proof of all the betrayals he had suffered. The sun was beginning to set when they returned to the island's main building. Thomas prepared a simple dinner with the supplies he had brought while carefully planning his next steps. He had enough documents to confront his brothers and recover everything that had been stolen from him, but he knew he needed to act intelligently. The next morning, Thomas woke up with a clear idea of what to do. He put Snowball in the boat, along with the most important documents, and returned to the lakeshore where his old house stood. The businessman from New York hadn't arrived yet, and the house remained empty. Nancy from the store was the first person he sought out. The woman was surprised to see him back so soon, thinking he had given up fighting for his rights. Thomas asked to use the store's phone and called directly to businessman Garrett Thompson's office in New York. The conversation was brief and direct. Thomas explained that the sale of the house had been fraudulent, that he had documents proving the power of attorney was fake, and that he was willing to resolve the situation amicably. The businessman, who was an honest person, was shocked to learn he had been deceived and agreed to cancel the purchase immediately. The next step was more difficult. Thomas needed to confront his brothers, but he knew they would deny everything and try to intimidate him as they always did. He decided to seek help from someone he trusted, Father Joseph, the local parish priest who had known the Anderson family for over 50 years. Father Joseph was outraged when he learned what had happened. The clergyman had always considered Thomas the most honest of the Anderson brothers and offered to mediate a family meeting. He called Richard, Michael, and Elizabeth, summoning them for a conversation at the church the next day. The meeting was tense from the first moment. The three siblings arrived with an air of superiority, clearly annoyed at having been summoned by the priest. Richard, always the group's spokesperson, began talking about how Thomas was disturbing the family with fantasies about fake powers of attorney. That's when Thomas placed the original documents on the sacristy table. The silence that followed was deafening. Elizabeth paled when she saw her mother's handwriting. Michael started sweating and Richard tried to maintain his authoritative posture, but his voice trembled when he spoke. The first attempt was to deny the authenticity of the documents. Richard said that anyone could have forged those papers, that there was no way to prove they were real. It was then that Thomas showed the letters exchanged between the siblings themselves, planning how to hide his inheritance. Elizabeth broke first. The youngest sister began to cry and admitted that she had always felt guilty for what they had done. She revealed that the original idea had been Richard's, who had convinced the other two that Thomas would never know the difference anyway. Michael tried to defend himself by saying he just followed his older siblings, thinking they were doing what was best for everyone. But it was Richard who showed his true face when confronted with the evidence. He slammed his fist on the table and shouted that Thomas had always been a loser and that he didn't deserve the family properties. Father Joseph intervened before the argument turned into physical aggression. The clergyman sternly reprimanded Richard for his behavior and reminded everyone that they were in God's house. It was then that Thomas did something no one expected. Instead of demanding revenge, he proposed a solution. "I could make you pay for everything you've done to me," Thomas said in a calm but firm voice. "I have enough documents to prove the forgery, to recover all the assets you stole from me, and even to press criminal charges against you. But I won't do that." The siblings were confused by the statement. Elizabeth stopped crying, Michael raised his head, and even Richard seemed surprised. Thomas continued explaining his proposal, while Snowball remained lying quietly at his feet. "I'll keep my house, which has always been rightfully mine. I'll keep the island that Mother left to me. But in return, I want you to help me with something important. Let's turn the island into something that benefits the whole community, not just our family." Thomas's proposal was ambitious, to create a community center on the island to serve needy elderly people in the region. The place would have therapeutic activities, use the mineral water from the spring for health treatments, and offer a gathering space for people who felt abandoned by their families. Father Joseph was moved by the idea and immediately offered the church's support for the project. Elizabeth, still ashamed of what she had done, was the first to agree to participate. Michael agreed hesitantly, but Richard remained resistant, claiming the project was a poor man's dream. It was then that Thomas revealed the island's true value, showing the reports on the mineral water and the commercial assessments his mother had commissioned. Richard's eyes lit up when he realized how much money was involved, but Thomas made it clear that he wasn't interested in commercial exploitation. "This water will help sick people, not enrich our family," Thomas declared firmly. "Anyone who wants to participate in the project is welcome. Those who only want to profit can look elsewhere." The meeting ended with a tentative agreement. The three siblings would have to officially return all the assets they had taken from Thomas, including documents and false powers of attorney. In return, he would not file criminal charges against them, provided they actively participated in the community project on the island. Elizabeth was the first to sign the restitution documents, followed hesitantly by Michael. Richard resisted until the end, but the pressure from the priest and the threat of criminal charges convinced him to accept the terms. In the weeks that followed, Thomas discovered that he wasn't the only one who had suffered at the hands of his siblings. Several people from the community approached him with stories of small scams and tricks that Richard in particular had pulled over the years. Mrs. Ethel, a 75-year-old widow, told how Richard had offered to handle her pension paperwork, charging exorbitant fees for simple services. Old Ray, the retired blacksmith, revealed that Michael had never paid back a loan from 5 years ago, always promising to settle it next month. These revelations helped Thomas understand that the problem with his brothers went far beyond family issues. They had grown accustomed to taking advantage of simpler people, believing they would never be confronted for their actions. The community center project began to take shape when Father Joseph organized a meeting with representatives from various families in the area. The idea of a space dedicated to needy seniors sparked immediate interest, especially among those who had faced situations similar to what Thomas had experienced. Mrs. Susan, an 80-year-old woman who had lived alone since her children moved to the capital, was one of the first to volunteer to help. She had been a seamstress all her life and offered to teach the craft to others at the center. Old Jim, 72 years old, was a retired carpenter and got excited about the possibility of using his skills to help build and maintain the space. He examined the ruins of the old hotel and assured that the main structure was solid, needing only basic renovations. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing, the first positive surprise came when Elizabeth showed up at Thomas's house bringing her personal savings to contribute to the project. His sister was genuinely remorseful and wanted to do something concrete to repair the damage caused. "Thomas, I know money doesn't erase what we did," she said with eyes red from crying. "But I really want to help. I've always envied your ability to be happy with simple things, while I was always chasing status and appearances." Elizabeth revealed that her marriage was going through difficulties precisely because of financial issues. Her husband had discovered some of the family's tricks and was questioning her character. Participating in the project would be a way for her to try to rebuild her own life. Michael took longer to get effectively involved, but ended up contributing construction materials from his warehouse. He admitted that he was struggling with his business and that collaborating on the project could help improve his reputation in the community. Richard, on the other hand, participated only formally, doing the bare minimum to avoid being sued. He showed up at meetings with a sour face and constantly criticized the group's decisions, claiming everything was a waste of time. The turning point in Richard's attitude happened when Thomas discovered something that changed the family dynamics forever. Snowball had started to display strange behavior whenever Richard appeared, growling softly and positioning himself between the man and Thomas. One afternoon, while organizing materials for the island renovation, Snowball started barking fiercely when Richard approached a specific box. The dog was agitated in a way Thomas had never seen before, as if trying to warn of some danger. The box contained old family documents, including papers that belonged to their mother. Richard tried to grab the box quickly, claiming they were just personal mementos, but Snowball wouldn't let him near it. Thomas decided to examine the contents of the box later, alone. What he found left him shocked. There was a letter from Sarah, his ex-wife, addressed to him, but that had clearly never been delivered. The letter was dated 15 years ago, exactly during the period when she had disappeared. In the letter, Sarah explained that she hadn't left Thomas out of a lack of love, but because she had been threatened by Richard. The older brother had discovered that she knew about the manipulations the family was doing with their mother's assets and threatened her to keep silent. "My dear Thomas," the letter said, "I know you won't understand my sudden departure, but I can't put you in danger. Richard came to me yesterday and said that if I told you about the fake documents, he would make something terrible happen. I'd rather leave than see you suffer because of me." The letter continued, explaining that Sarah had overheard a conversation between the three brothers, planning how to hide Thomas's inheritance. She had tried to warn him discreetly, but Richard noticed and confronted her violently. "I can't stay knowing you're being robbed by your own brothers and do nothing, but I also can't risk your safety by telling the truth. I'm leaving, hoping that one day you'll discover everything on your own and can defend yourself." The letter ended with a revelation that broke Thomas's heart. Sarah was pregnant when she left. She was carrying a child he never got to meet, afraid that Richard would use the baby as a threat. "If you ever receive this letter, know that our son grew up far away but always knew who his father is. I taught him that you're a good man, who just couldn't come looking for us because difficult situations kept us apart." Thomas held the letter with trembling hands, feeling a mix of anger and sadness he had never experienced before. 15 years of loneliness, 15 years believing he had been abandoned, when in reality he had been the victim of a cruel blackmail by his own brother. Snowball seemed to sense his owner's pain and approached, pressing his snout against Thomas's legs in a comforting way. The dog had tried to warn him about Richard from the beginning, as if sensing the evil emanating from that man. The decision to confront Richard was immediate. Thomas marched to his brother's house, carrying the letter and demanding explanations. Richard tried to deny everything at first, but when he saw the document in Thomas's hands, he realized his lies had come to an end. "You were always too weak to deserve a woman like Sarah," Richard said with contempt. "She was too smart to stay with a fisherman with no ambition. I just helped her realize that faster." The confession of blackmail came next, when Richard realized there was no use lying anymore. He admitted threatening Sarah, but claimed it was for the good of the family, preventing her from causing trouble for everyone. "And my son?" Thomas asked with a broken voice. "You stole my chance to meet my own child." Richard shrugged, as if that were an unimportant detail. "If she chose to leave pregnant, that's her problem. You wouldn't even know how to raise a child anyway." It was at that moment that something definitively changed in Thomas. All the kindness and patience he had maintained until then turned into iron determination. He would no longer accept being trampled by that man who had destroyed his family. "It's over, Richard," Thomas said with a firm voice. "You're going to help me find my wife and son, or I'll make you pay for everything you've done. And I'm not just talking about a lawsuit. I'm talking about telling the whole town what kind of person you really are." The threat worked because Richard valued his reputation in the community very much. He had built an image of a serious and respectable person, and the exposure of his crimes could destroy everything he had achieved. Reluctantly, Richard admitted he knew where Sarah had settled. He had discreetly kept tabs on her life during the early years to make sure she wouldn't return to cause trouble. She lived in a town 200 kilometers away, worked as a teacher, and had raised her son alone. The most important information was that Sarah had never remarried. According to the information Richard had, she always told her son that his father was a good man who couldn't be present due to complicated family circumstances. Thomas demanded the full address and the son's name. He discovered the boy was named William, was 14 years old, and studied at the public school in the town where they lived. The physical description Richard provided left no doubt. He was indeed Thomas's son. The trip to the town where Sarah lived was one of the most distressing journeys of Thomas's life. He took Snowball in the car borrowed from Elizabeth, who insisted on accompanying him as a form of moral support and also to witness the amends being made. The address led them to a simple but well-kept house in a quiet residential neighborhood. Thomas stood in front of the gate for long minutes, trying to gather the courage to ring the bell. Snowball seemed to sense his anxiety and stayed quietly by his side. When he finally rang the bell, a familiar female voice answered through the intercom. It was Sarah, 15 years older, but with the same sweet voice he remembered. Thomas identified himself with his heart racing, expecting any reaction but the one that came. "Thomas? My God, is it really you?" Her voice trembled with emotion. "William, come here, quick!" When the gate opened, Thomas first saw Sarah, still beautiful at 52, with a few white strands in her brown hair, but the same warm smile that had won him over decades ago. Behind her came a tall, dark-haired teenager with the same eyes as Thomas. The reunion was emotional from the first second. Sarah threw herself into Thomas's arms, crying and asking for forgiveness repeatedly. William was shy at first, but Snowball broke the ice by approaching the boy, asking for affection. "Dad," said William for the first time, testing how the word sounded. "Mom always said I have a father who loves me, but couldn't come to see me." Thomas hugged his son tightly, feeling that his life was finally becoming whole again. Elizabeth, who was watching everything from a distance, couldn't hold back tears upon witnessing the family reunion. Sarah explained that she had never stopped loving Thomas, but fear of Richard's threats had kept her from making contact all those years. She had discreetly followed his life through mutual acquaintances, always hoping he would discover the truth about his brothers. "I knew you were too honest to suspect them," said Sarah, "but I also knew that one day your kindness would be rewarded. When I heard you had discovered everything about the inheritance, I was sure our time had come." William shared that he always asked about his father, and Sarah always answered with great affection, but without giving details about why they didn't live together. The boy had grown up imagining what it would be like to meet his father, and the reality exceeded all expectations. "You look exactly as I imagined," said William, making Thomas smile through tears. "And is this dog yours?" "He's beautiful." Snowball had immediately adopted William, following the boy around the house and allowing him to pet him all he wanted. It was as if the dog knew this was a family member who had finally returned to the right place. The conversation lasted all afternoon, with Sarah and William listening fascinated to the story of the discovery on the island and the community project being developed. William became especially interested when he learned he would have the chance to see the place where his father had been born and raised. "Can I come live with you?" the boy asked hopefully. "I mean, if Mom agrees. I've always dreamed of seeing the lake and learning to fish." Sarah smiled and said she was already planning to move back to the area. She had saved money all those years, working as a teacher, and always knew she would return home one day. The time had come. "I also have some savings," Sarah said. "I want to contribute to this project on the island." "It seems exactly the kind of thing you would do, Thomas. You've always had a heart for helping others." The return to their hometown was triumphant. Elizabeth had gone ahead to spread the news of the reunion, and many people were waiting at Thomas's house to meet William and see Sarah again. The whole community was moved by the story. Father Joseph organized a special Thanksgiving Mass for the family reunion. During the ceremony, he told the entire congregation how Thomas's kindness had been rewarded and how the Island Project was bringing the community together. Richard didn't show up at the Mass, but Michael was there and approached Thomas to apologize personally. He admitted he had always known about his older brother's blackmail, but never had the courage to confront him. "I was a coward," Michael said. "I chose to stay quiet and enjoy the benefits instead of doing what was right. But seeing you now with your family reunited, I realize how I wasted the chance to have a real brother." The Island Project gained new momentum with Sarah and William's return. The teacher brought educational ideas to implement at the community center, including literacy classes for adults and craft workshops. William was excited about the possibility of creating a program of activities for children to visit the elderly. The renovation of the old hotel ruins began with the participation of the entire community. Each family contributed what they could: labor, materials, food for the volunteer workers, or simply moral support for the project. Old Jim, the retired carpenter, took on the technical coordination of the construction. He had studied the original blueprints of the hotel and proposed a renovation that would preserve the historical structure while adapting the spaces to the needs of the community center. Mrs. Susan organized a group of volunteer seamstresses to make curtains, towels, and other decorative items. The women gathered every afternoon in the parish hall, sewing and talking about the progress of the work. The mineral spring became the centerpiece of the center's therapeutic project. Sarah researched hydrotherapy and discovered that the water's medicinal properties could be enhanced with specific exercises and massages. William became the unofficial guide of the island, taking visitors to see the spring and telling the story of his father's discovery. The boy had a natural talent for storytelling and could move people with the details of Thomas's journey. Snowball also adapted perfectly to the new family dynamic. The dog divided his attention between Thomas, Sarah, and William, but was always especially alert when visitors arrived on the island. It was as if he had taken on the role of guardian of the place. The first big surprise of the project came when a group of doctors from a state university learned about the spring and asked for permission to conduct further studies. The results confirmed that the water had even more exceptional properties than the old reports had indicated. Dr. Frank Wilson, the research coordinator, explained that the combination of minerals found in the water was extremely rare and could benefit people with various health issues, especially those related to aging. "This spring is a true gift from nature," said the doctor. "With proper use, it can help treat arthritis, circulation problems, stress, and even some types of depression." The scientific discovery brought media attention to the project. Regional newspapers published stories about the island and the community center, attracting more volunteers and donations. Some companies offered to sponsor equipment and materials. It was at this moment that Richard attempted his final blow. He appeared on the island accompanied by a lawyer, claiming he was entitled to a share of any profits that might be generated from the mineral water exploitation. "This inheritance was from our mother," argued Richard. "Thomas can't keep everything just because he found some old papers. I'm also her son, and I have rights." The attempt was thwarted when Father Joseph presented documents proving that Richard had officially renounced any rights to the island during family mediation. Furthermore, Sarah served as a witness to the threats he had made in the past. William, who was present during the argument, surprised everyone by confronting his uncle with impressive maturity for his 14 years. "Uncle Richard," the boy said firmly, "you spent 15 years keeping me from knowing my father. Now that we're happy and helping others, you want to ruin everything because of money." The nephew's words hit Richard in a way no one expected. The man, who always seemed insensitive, began to cry in front of everyone, admitting for the first time that he had made terrible mistakes. "I was always jealous of Thomas," Richard confessed through tears. "He could be happy with little, while I was never satisfied with anything. When I saw that he had found true love with Sarah, I wanted to destroy that too." The apology that followed was moving. Richard knelt before Thomas, begging forgiveness for all the years of suffering he had caused. He promised to do anything to make amends, including using his connections to help develop the project. Thomas, with the big heart he always had, helped his brother up and hugged him. "Family is family," he said. "No matter what happened. If you want to start over, there's a place for you here." Richard's transformation was gradual but real. He began visiting the island regularly, helping with construction, and even participating in community activities. He discovered he had a talent for organization and took over the project's administrative coordination. Michael, inspired by his older brother's change, also became more actively involved. He donated a significant amount of building materials and began working personally on the construction during weekends. Elizabeth became responsible for the financial part of the project, using her accounting skills to organize donations and financial reporting. She had separated from her husband, but found in her participation at the community center a new way to find purpose in life. The first group of elderly people began visiting the island even before construction was fully completed. Mrs. Ethel, the widow who had been deceived by Richard, was one of the first to experience the benefits of the mineral water and social interaction. "I hadn't left my house for months," she said emotionally. "After my husband passed away, I thought I had no reason left to live. But here I feel useful again. I can help other people and make new friends." Old Ray, the retired blacksmith, found in the center an opportunity to teach his trade to interested young people. He set up a small workshop where William and other boys from the area learned basic metallurgy techniques. The official opening of the Hope Island Community Center took place 6 months after the discovery of the documents in the cave. The celebration brought together over 300 people, including local authorities, journalists, and families from across the region. The city mayor gave an emotional speech about how the project had transformed the community and served as an example for other localities. He announced that the city government would cover part of the center's maintenance costs and help promote the benefits of the mineral water. Dr. Frank Wilson presented the complete results of the research on the spring, confirming that the water had scientifically proven therapeutic properties. He proposed a partnership with the university to develop specific treatment protocols. During the ceremony, Thomas gave a speech that moved everyone present. He told his story from the day he discovered his brother's betrayal to the present moment, highlighting how each obstacle had turned into an opportunity for growth. "When my brothers sold my house and I thought I had lost everything, I was actually gaining much more than I imagined," said Thomas. "I gained the chance to meet my son, to win back my wife, to discover a treasure left by my mother, and most importantly, to help people in need." William also spoke during the ceremony, representing the community's youth. He thanked his father for creating a space where different generations could interact and learn from each other. "My father taught me that true wealth isn't in what we have, but in what we can share," said the boy. "This island has always been special, but it became magical when it started bringing people together and healing hearts." Sarah, as the center's educational coordinator, presented the educational programs that would be offered. In addition to literacy classes for adults, there would be workshops in crafts, regional cooking, storytelling, and even basic computer classes. The surprise of the inauguration was the arrival of a delegation of representatives from other towns interested in replicating the Hope Island Community Center model. The project had gained regional recognition as an example of social inclusion and sustainable use of natural resources. Richard, who had taken on administrative coordination, presented a detailed report on the activities developed and the results achieved in the first few months. He had proven to be an excellent organizer and managed to systematize the operation of all activities. The party lasted all afternoon, with musical performances by the center's own attendees, tastings of dishes prepared in the cooking workshops, and an exhibition of crafts made by the elderly. Snowball moved freely through the party, receiving affection from everyone and serving as a kind of official mascot for the center. The dog had become a constant presence on the island and was beloved by all the visitors. In the evening, when the guests had left, the Anderson family gathered on the porch of the island's main house to talk about future plans. It was the first time in decades that the four siblings were together in harmony, united by a common purpose. "I never imagined that something so bad could create something so beautiful," said Elizabeth. "If it weren't for all that confusion with the inheritance, maybe we would never have discovered the true potential of this island." Michael agreed, admitting that the project had changed his perspective on success and happiness. "I always thought making money was the most important thing," he said, "but seeing the joy of the people here, I realized there are much more valuable achievements." Richard reflected deeply on how his greed almost destroyed the family. "I spent my whole life chasing after things that in the end weren't worth anything," he admitted. "I almost lost my brothers, almost broke up a family, all because of pride and envy." Thomas listened to the brothers patiently, but his attention was focused on Sarah and William, who were talking quietly about their future plans. The son wanted to study veterinary medicine to care for animals like Snowball, while the mother was thinking about specializing in gerontology. "And you, Thomas?" asked Father Joseph, who had been invited to stay for dinner. "What are your plans now that you've fulfilled your mother's dream?" Thomas smiled and pointed to the lake, where the full moon was reflected in the calm waters. "My plan is to keep being a fisherman," he said, "but now I fish for smiles, fish for hope, fish for people who have lost their way and need a place to start over." The answer brought smiles to everyone present. It was typical of Thomas to turn something complex into a simple and beautiful metaphor. William said he wanted to learn to fish in the literal sense too, so he could join his father on morning fishing trips. The conversation went on into the early hours, with each person sharing memories, plans, and expectations. It was a rebuilt family, not just by blood ties, but mainly by bonds of love and common purpose. In the months following the inauguration, the Hope Island Community Center became established as a regional reference in elderly care and social integration. The waiting list to participate in the activities grew steadily, requiring the expansion of the programs offered. The mineral water from the spring began attracting visitors from other regions, people who came seeking alternative treatments for various health problems. Thomas made sure to keep access free, funding the operations through donations and partnerships. A major mineral water company became interested in the commercial exploitation rights for the spring, offering $1 million sum for the concession. The proposal was unanimously rejected by the Anderson family and the community, who preferred to maintain the social character of the project. "Money we can earn in other ways," said Thomas during the meeting where the proposal was discussed. "But the chance to transform lives has no price that can pay for it." William stood out as one of the center's main volunteers, developing recreational activities for children and serving as a bridge between different generations. He created a program called Grandparents of the Heart, where elderly people without families were symbolically adopted by local families. Sarah implemented a continuing education program that caught the attention of universities and educational organizations. She developed specific methodologies for teaching adults and the elderly, adapting the content to the needs and limitations of each age group. Elizabeth discovered a vocation for managing social projects and decided to take a public administration course. She wanted to specialize so she could replicate the center's model in other communities that showed interest. Michael transformed his construction materials warehouse into a kind of donation hub for social projects in the region. He began coordinating the distribution of materials for renovating homes of needy families and other community initiatives. Richard surprised everyone by running for city council in the municipal elections, using as his platform the expansion of social projects similar to the islands. He had found in politics a way to make up for his past mistakes by contributing to the common good. The story of the Anderson family and Hope Island began to be documented by researchers interested in successful cases of community development. Universities sent students to conduct fieldwork on the project. Snowball, at 13 years old, continued to be the official guardian of the island, welcoming visitors with joy and serving as animal therapy for many of the elderly who attended the center. The dog had become a minor local celebrity. 1 year after its opening, the center received a state award for social innovation, recognizing the project's positive impact on the community. The award ceremony brought together officials and representatives from social organizations across the state. During the acceptance speech, Thomas made sure to credit the project's success to all the people who believed in the idea from the start. He mentioned every volunteer, every donor, and every family that contributed in some way. "This award isn't mine," Thomas said emotionally. "It belongs to every person who believed it was possible to turn abandonment into welcome, loneliness into companionship, sadness into joy. It belongs to an entire community that proved that together we are stronger." The official recognition brought new funding and partnership opportunities. National and international organizations became interested in the model developed on the island, proposing adaptations for different cultural and geographical realities. The Anderson family was invited to participate in conferences and seminars on social development, sharing the Hope Island experience with professionals from various countries. William accompanied his parents on some of these trips, serving as an example of how the project positively impacted local youth. 2 years after the initial discovery, the island had been completely transformed. The old ruined hotel now housed activity rooms, medical offices, craft workshops, a library, a community kitchen, and even a small auditorium for cultural presentations. The spring remained the heart of the center, but it was now surrounded by therapeutic gardens where visitors could cultivate medicinal plants and ornamental flowers. The mineral water was used in various treatments, always under medical supervision. William turned 16 and decided he wanted to study medicine to work at the center after graduation. He had developed a special passion for caring for the elderly and already showed exceptional skills in dealing with seniors. Sarah specialized in educational gerontology and began teaching courses for elderly caregivers throughout the region. She developed her own method that combined traditional teaching techniques with innovative therapies using the mineral water. The story of Hope Island inspired the creation of a regional foundation dedicated to developing similar projects. Thomas was invited to be the honorary president of the organization, but preferred to remain as a consultant, leaving management to specialized professionals. The center began receiving international visitors interested in learning about the American model of community integration. Delegations from countries such as Japan, Germany, and Canada visited the island to study the methodologies developed there. Snowball, despite his advanced age, remained a constant presence at the center. The dog became a subject of study for veterinarians interested in the therapeutic effects of interaction between animals and the elderly. His longevity and vitality were attributed to the loving environment in which he lived. The national attention the project received caught the interest of television producers, who proposed making a documentary about the Anderson family's story. Thomas agreed to participate, but on the condition that all funds raised would go toward expanding the social projects. The documentary Hope Island: A Story of Forgiveness and New Beginnings was broadcast nationwide and moved millions of viewers. The simple story of the fisherman who turned a family betrayal into a social project inspired people from across the country. After the documentary aired, the center began receiving donations from all over the United States. People sent letters sharing their own stories of overcoming hardships and thanking them for the inspiration. Many families organized trips to visit the island in person. The pressure to commercialize the mineral water increased significantly, with companies offering ever higher amounts for the rights. Thomas and his family maintained their position of not accepting commercial offers, preferring to preserve the social character of the project. "Our mother left this water to heal people, not to make anyone rich," Thomas explained, whenever questioned about the million-dollar offers. "If we start thinking about profit, we lose the essence of what we're doing here." William graduated from high school with the top grades in his class and received a full scholarship to study medicine at a federal university. He kept his plan to specialize in geriatrics so he could work at the center after graduation. During William's graduation ceremony, Thomas gave an emotional speech about how education had been the key to breaking cycles of ignorance and greed that had affected his family for generations. "My son represents a new generation of the Anderson family," Thomas said proudly. "A generation that will use knowledge to help others, not to take advantage of them." Sarah was invited to be the pedagogical coordinator for a state network of senior centers being created based on the Hope Island model. She accepted the challenge but kept her operational base on the original island. Elizabeth completed her specialization in public administration and was elected as a councilwoman with the highest vote count in the city's history. Her political platform was entirely based on expanding social projects and valuing seniors in the community. Michael expanded his construction materials business, but now focused exclusively on supplying social projects. He had found a way to reconcile financial success with social responsibility. Richard completed his first term as a councilman with record approval ratings, passing bills that created 5 new community centers in the region. He had become a passionate advocate for senior rights and social inclusion policies. On the 3rd anniversary of the center's inauguration, the Anderson family organized a large celebration that brought together over 1,000 people. The celebration lasted 3 days and included cultural activities, educational talks, and a crafts fair. During the festival, the creation of the Margaret Elizabeth Anderson Institute was announced, a non-profit organization dedicated to replicating the Hope Island model in underserved communities across the country. Thomas was named honorary president of the institute, but insisted that the executive presidency be held by professionals specialized in social project management. He preferred to remain focused on direct service to visitors of the original center. The mineral water from the spring was officially recognized by the Department of Health as a natural therapeutic resource, allowing doctors to prescribe specific treatments using its properties. This brought additional scientific credibility to the project. William began his medical studies as the youngest student in his class, but also one of the most dedicated. He spent his vacations on the island, helping with services and developing research on the therapeutic effects of intergenerational interaction. The Anderson family's story was included in high school textbooks as an example of overcoming adversity and social responsibility. Schools from across the region organized educational field trips to visit the center and learn about citizenship and solidarity. Snowball turned 15 and, despite his advanced age, remained an active presence at the center. Veterinarians studied his exceptional longevity, attributing it to the combination of love, moderate physical activity, and a stimulating social environment. The center began offering training courses for elderly caregivers, attracting professionals from across the region interested in learning the methodologies developed on the island. The courses always had waiting lists due to high demand. Thomas, at 67, continued fishing every morning, but now always accompanied by someone from the center who wanted to learn the technique or simply enjoy the tranquility of the lake. Fishing had become one of the most sought-after therapeutic activities at the center. Many seniors discovered in fishing a way to relax, socialize, and connect with nature. Thomas trained volunteers to assist in water activities. Sarah developed an exchange program between community centers in different regions, allowing seniors to travel and experience other realities and share experiences. The program was an immediate success. The Anderson family received several awards and recognitions for their social contribution, but they always made sure to share the honors with all the volunteers and partners of the project. For them, success was collective. The center's 5th anniversary was marked by the inauguration of a new wing, dedicated exclusively to physical rehabilitation activities for the elderly. The expansion was entirely funded through donations from individuals moved by the family's story. During the inauguration ceremony of the new wing, Thomas announced that he was creating a permanent fund to ensure the center's sustainability. The fund would be supported by donations and income from conservative investments. William was in his 3rd year of medical school and was already interning at the center during vacations, accompanying the care and developing his thesis on the benefits of hydrotherapy with mineral water in the elderly. The international impact of the project resulted in an invitation for Thomas to participate in a world conference on active aging at the World Health Organization. He traveled to Geneva, accompanied by Sarah and William. During the conference, Thomas presented the center's results to an audience of experts from dozens of countries. His simple and emotional presentation received a standing ovation and generated interest from international organizations. As a result of participation in the conference, the center was selected to receive technical and financial support from international organizations interested in replicating the model in developing countries. Snowball began to show more pronounced signs of aging, but remained a beloved presence at the center. The attendees organized a special birthday party for the dog, which brought together hundreds of people who had been touched by his presence over the years. Elizabeth was re-elected as a councilwoman with an even larger vote than the first time, basing her campaign on the concrete results of the social projects she had implemented. She had become a reference in public policies for the elderly. Michael expanded his business to include a vocational training center where underprivileged youth learned trades related to construction. The training center operated in partnership with Hope Island, promoting integration between generations. Richard was elected mayor of the city, with a platform based entirely on expanding the social projects started on the island. His personal transformation had become an example of how people can genuinely change. The institute created by the family had established 15 similar centers in different states across the country, each adapted to local characteristics while maintaining the core principles of social integration and sustainable use of natural resources. William graduated from medical school with honors and immediately began a specialization in geriatrics. His thesis on hydrotherapy was published in specialized scientific journals and cited in international research. The mineral water from the spring continued to be studied by researchers from various universities, who regularly confirmed its exceptional therapeutic properties. The studies contributed to the development of new treatment protocols. Thomas, at 70 years old, slowed down his pace of activities a bit, but remained the central figure of the center. He had become a sort of patriarch of the community, consulted on important decisions, and respected for his wisdom and kindness. Sarah officially took over as the general director of the center, a position she had already been performing in practice for years. Her experience and knowledge in gerontology made her a national reference in the field of elderly care. The center began receiving researchers interested in studying the family, and community management model developed there. Universities sent students of administration, psychology, and social work to do internships and research. Snowball passed away peacefully at 16 years old during a sunny morning, lying in his favorite spot on the porch of the main house. His departure was mourned by the entire community, which organized a special ceremony in his honor. Snowball's funeral gathered hundreds of people who had been touched by the loving presence of the dog over the years. A statue was commissioned to immortalize his memory at the entrance of the center, with a plaque that read, "Snowball, the dog who helped discover hidden treasures." William completed his specialization in geriatrics and returned permanently to work at the center as a resident physician. He brought updated knowledge on geriatric treatments and implemented new evidence-based protocols. The 10th anniversary of the center was marked by the inauguration of a museum that told the story of the Anderson family and the transformation of the island. The museum included original documents, historical photographs, and testimonies from people who had participated in the project from the beginning. During the 10th anniversary ceremony, Thomas gave his last major public speech as the leader of the center. He announced that he was officially retiring from administrative activities, passing the leadership to the new generation. "When I discovered the documents hidden by my mother, I thought I had found a treasure," Thomas said emotionally. But the real treasure wasn't in the papers or the mineral water. It was in the people who came together to transform this place into a symbol of hope and love. William officially took over as the medical director of the center, while Sarah continued as general director. The generational transition was smooth because the core values of the project had been internalized by the entire team. Elizabeth was elected state representative, bringing the locally developed public policies to a higher level of government. Michael expanded his businesses to include a construction company specialized in social projects. Richard completed his first term as mayor with historic approval ratings. The center had become a global reference in active aging and community integration. Delegations from over 40 countries visited the island to study the model and adapt it to their local realities. The International Foundation created from the island's model had established similar centers in dozens of countries, benefiting millions of elderly people worldwide. Thomas had unwittingly become a global icon for the senior appreciation movement. At 75 years old, Thomas continued living on the island with Sarah, fishing every morning and welcoming visitors interested in learning his story. He had found the simple happiness he had always sought, multiplied by the satisfaction of having helped so many people. The mineral water from the spring continued to flow abundantly, as if nature wanted to ensure that treasure would never run dry. Geological studies confirmed the spring had the potential to remain active for hundreds of years. William married a fellow doctor who shared his passion for geriatric care. The couple decided to live on the island and continue the family's work, ensuring the legacy of Mrs. Margaret Elizabeth Anderson would endure. The story of Hope Island had become a symbol of how love can overcome greed, how family unity can heal deep wounds, and how small actions can generate enormous transformations. Thomas often said his mother had been prophetic in hiding those documents on the island. She knew that one day he would need strength to face life's betrayals, and she provided not only the legal tools, but also the perfect environment to rebuild his story. The spring remained the beating heart of the center, its crystal-clear waters reflecting not only the sunlight, but also the light of hope that illuminated the lives of all who found refuge in that special place. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story of overcoming and forgiveness. Do you believe Thomas made the right decisions in forgiving his siblings and transforming his pain into a social project? Share your opinion in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. If you have a similar story of family reconciliation to share, leave it in the comments with sincere words. We'd love to read your experience. Thank you very much for your company, and don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories like this one.